Hey everyone, this is More Than Just Trucks, a podcast for gearheads, truckers, and anyone who wants to learn more about the trucking industry. This podcast is sponsored by Truck Country and Stoops Freightliner. Come along with me as we dive deeper into what makes this $700 billion industry an essential part of all our lives. Here, we will interview industry leaders, educators, and more as we aim to inform the population on all things trucking. Hi, and welcome to More Than Just Trucks podcast. I am Ray Clark, host, and today with me, I have one of my favorite persons on my podcast. I think we bounce each other back and forth between our shows, but I'll let you introduce yourself, Mr. Goninen.
Yeah, my name's Jay Goninen. I am the co-founder and president of a company called WrenchWay. I think we've talked a little bit about what WrenchWay does in the past with regard to technicians, with students, with schools, with shops, kind of the whole.
For those of you who don't know, WrenchWay started how many years ago as Find a Wrench?
Yeah, so we started that in 2017, and that was more of a recruiting type of company, right?
Yep.
So I actually started it because I had an issue finding techs for myself. I happened to be in the ag field at the time, so doing ag machinery, but grew up in an automotive shop and spent some time on the heavy truck side, then compact equipment side, worked for Bobcat Company for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And then throughout all of that experience, always struggled to find technicians for myself. So really wanted to start a company around a specialist of technician recruitment. And so that grew really, really quickly. One of the problems that we had with Find a Wrench was that it wasn't fixing the core of the issue, right? A lot of it was, I have to go take a technician from you. You have to go take a technician from the other person. And so we wanted to come up with something that was really, truly trying to attack the core of the industry and really get more technicians into the industry, as well as keep the ones that we already have happy in this industry.
Yeah, exactly.
So, brought on a business partner in 2020, Mark Wilson, who's we're still co-founders to this day, and built the initial premise around WrenchWay was to build it like Zillow for housing. So really give a technician the ability to do their due diligence on a shop, really see what their fit is, right? I think maybe what's a good fit of a shop for me might not necessarily be a good fit of a shop for you. And so we built it almost like Zillow for housing, right? Where you could go on, do your research on a shop, really try to figure out what the best fit for you is. And so as we built that grew. We launched that in 2020. Ironically, we were ready to flip the switch in March of 2020 on it. We had built out the whole platform. And then, of course, we know what happened in March of 2020. So that delayed it a little bit. But then over time, we saw that there was a real need for these schools to get help. And a lot of times there was budgetary constraints, teacher shortage, right? We don't have enough teachers out there, which is an absolute killer.
Let alone the skilled trades side of things, right?
Right. And so we saw an opportunity to bring industry into schools and help these schools out in a way that they're just not going to be able to do. So we launched something at the time. It was called School Connect. It's now called School Assist. That grew much quicker than I think any of us anticipated. But and when I say that, at first it didn't. When we first launched it, we gave this away to schools and said, basically, you can ask for whatever you want.
Yeah.
And the industry will come help. Well, we flipped the switch on that and nothing happened, right? Like we're like, oh, this is such a cool part of our platform, and nothing happened. So we reallocated resources and put more effort and time behind the school piece, getting more schools onto the platform, as well as getting shops to actually help these schools out when they're asking for things. And over time, that just kind of had that snowball effect to where more and more schools got on the platform, more and more shops were actually being active on the platform. Yep. And we've had just some really cool stories out of it. So that part has grown a lot to the point to where we just teamed up with ASE.
Yeah, I was going to lead into that. Yeah, tell us your latest endeavor, because this is really cool for me.
Yeah, well, and you've seen us grow through the years,
like
right?
Top Shop all the way up through and being part of it.
Yeah, you have. You've been a supporter from the start. And so as we've grown it, what we've found was that we were starting to get people from outside of WrenchWay really become interested in what we were doing. One of those organizations was ASE. And so ASE is obviously a name that has been
The big blue steel.
Yes.
And if you wrench, you got to know what that name is.
Right.
You got to know that.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
And so we met with them and came up with a formal partnership where they're basically partners with us on the school assist side. With that, they were able to bring a lot more attention to it. So here's this thing that we're just growing little by little.
Yeah.
Bring ASE on to kind of stoke the fire. And now we're nearly 3,000 schools on school assist.
Unbelievable. And you started with a couple hundred?
It wasn't even, I think it was 125, like
125 schools, and you're up over 3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nationwide too, correct?
Nationwide.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That is good to see.
It is.
It's good to hear.
It's hard because what was crazy about that was here was this thing we built for schools. And at first we're trying to give it away to schools. And the schools are like, wait, we don't know who you are. And, at the time we still kind of had that recruiting.
Yeah.
I don't know, that
little aura.
reputation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of schools questioned why we were doing it. And then over time, as they saw that, hey, there isn't
here to
any
help
catch-ups.
us.
Yeah. You guys are here to help us. We've just seen that really, really kind of take off. And some of the stories that have come out of it have just been incredible.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have been fighting that battle as far as technician needs and everything. I mean, I'm in as deep as I can get, especially here locally with schools and stuff. But my God, I mean, we went to school, we had metal shop, we had wood shop, small engine and stuff. It's like far and few between that you can even get a small engines class or a transportation class anymore.
Yeah.
So it is good that the industry kind of is coming together, right? Between dealerships, independent shops, OEMs, stuff like that, and schools. Now how do we keep the kids involved, right? So today's topic a little bit is going to be Voice of the Technician Survey Report. How many years have you done this now, Jay? This
was our second year doing
correct?
it. Yeah. So. And just to give you a little background on this, I think one of the things that we've, we're now year almost 8 of doing this, at least being involved with the technician side. One of the things that we commonly heard was that technicians didn't feel like their voices were heard, right? That they were kind of just yelling at a wall, if you will, because nobody was listening. And so we wanted to really kind of give technicians the opportunity to give us feedback in a way that wasn't going to get them in trouble, wasn't going to have their employer mad.
It's as anonymous as can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we did this report. Last year was the first year we did it. We had about just under 800 responses to it. This year, in partnership with ASE, we had nearly 5,000. So a lot of really, really good data in here. And, as we go through this and we really read this, one of the things, if you're a shop that's out there that I would encourage you to do is not get defensive over what you're going to see. Because some of it doesn't paint our industry in a great light, right? And so just be able to kind of take the data as it is and question your own shop and see, hey, are we good at this or are we not?
We might be good at one thing, but lacking over here. And keep in mind, this is both automotive and diesel technicians. And he turned around and brought students' perspectives into it. So we have, some prospects coming into the industry and asking them what matters the most to them, what matters the least to them. So when you look at those numbers, I did some quick little stats here and I was looking at your overall numbers. So in this survey, we've got 43% in the automotive side. You got kind of a bummer for me because live in the diesel world, only 11%. So
need more of you diesel.
Yeah, I'm going to say diesel techs, pay attention closely to this one because we want your opinions. We really do. 6% of those were students. So I did some research, Jay, and it was, 5,000 is a big number, right? But then when the research I come up with, there's 300 plus thousand diesel technicians employed and another 592,000 automotive technicians. So
we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, literally, that's a small number. So if hopefully, between Jay and I and our podcast getting out there, and anybody else that's listening to our perspective, and trust me when I say our perspective is, I always say this to all my startup groups here at work, is I'm you guys just a few 40 plus years ago, maybe not 40, maybe 30 years ago.
Don't age yourself that much.
But I'm the kid that went through high school, took wood shop, took metal shop. Next thing I know, and I do joke, but I've got a great relationship with them now. But I joke that I went to what we call BOCES. I took heavy equipment repair and operation. Next thing I know, Ohio Diesel recruiters sitting at my kitchen table and I'm signing paperwork, right? And to this day, it's really good for me because I've been a keynote speaker for a couple of their graduating classes and stuff.
So cool, by the way.
And that's been like a really very humbling moment. Asked to go back to your, alma mater from a tech school perspective and stuff. So definitely we gotta keep the move on. You guys are gonna hear some numbers in here. In the end, it is. I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but in the end, it's disappointing when we go over some of these numbers.
Yeah.
But like I said, great job getting both auto and diesel in there, and I love the perspective of now bringing in the students. So how did you get how do you roll this out to people? If I'm a diesel tech, I'm an auto tech, how do I learn about this? How do I know about this?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is through our different, just normal marketing channels that we normally go through with WrenchWay. We've got a really, really good audience of technicians on any of our social media platforms, but specifically we've got a pretty great TikTok following.
Yeah, you do.
YouTube following. A lot of those areas work well, but I think one of the big keys to a survey of this size was partnerships, right? So we had a number of great partners over and above ASE. ASE was phenomenal throughout this entire thing. They were really, really easy to work with. And I think they have a lot of the same values that we do. So as we kind of went after the survey, it made sense for them. But then we had a number of other businesses that joined us, kind of with this,
right,
to be able to support us in getting that message out. So it wasn't so much about them paying us to be a part of it. Because it was more just help us spread the word on this. And
I shared your link.
Yes.
I may have gotten maybe 10 guys in there. Right? I don't know.
Well, based on our diesel technician percentage, that might be a good portion of it. But we do want to get all of these sectors, right? And even one that you didn't mention was auto body and collision. Even that sector, that was 1% of respondents. That's not enough, right? So we need to get more.
Still skilled trades people.
It is, still kind of a lot of their gripes. I spoke at a collision conference earlier this year in North Carolina, and a lot of their feedback and comments are very similar to what we hear with diesel or automotive. So there are a lot of parallels between all of this. And the one that I do have to point out is instructor. We had instructors, a lot of instructors give us feedback. And there are a lot of instructors that have feedback for us as an industry, and we need to listen to that feedback because we need to help build these programs, right?
I mean, I honestly say, I tell our GMs that for some reason, if you do want to know the pulse of your dealership, talk to your technicians. They truly are kind of they're that center hub. They're not just a spoke in the wheel. They are kind of that center hub that keeps dealerships. Think of an independent shop, right? Yeah. Where it's not put into any kind of parts sales and service silos of any sort, right? They could be a parts guy chasing it down themselves, running, picking up stuff. But yeah, that was interesting. Now that you mentioned that you got a second largest number was instructors.
It's crazy. I if you would have asked me to predict that, zero chance I would have gotten that right. But I think instructors really do fall in that same kind of category as technicians of that, they want to have their voices heard. They want to make this industry better.
Yeah.
But maybe they can't.
Their job kind of relies on it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And we hear from programs each and every day that are hanging by a thread.
Oh, yeah.
As far as not getting cut. Right. And we had a heartbreaking story probably, 2 months or so ago where it was a collision program up in the greater Northeast. They reached out, or actually we had reached out saying, hey, we have some businesses in the area, some shops that want to help you out. And they said, well, we'd love that, but we just got told by our superintendent last week that they're shutting down this program due to lack of interest.
Man, it's you say that, and I feel like I've heard that even in some Wisconsin tech schools. Absolutely. That, hey, our dean or principal or whatever, they're looking at us and saying, hey, if to the point where if you're the instructor, you better recruit to fill your own class even to that point,
Well,
right?
and I think we as industry need to help them out, right?
Exactly.
Because I think we've all heard of some of these tech schools that will maybe overpromise a student to come into their program, right? And maybe they're telling them that they're going to start off at $100,000 a year, right out of school, right? And it's not realistic. And we have to be transparent and real with the students and their parents, right? And I think my hope is that we don't ever want to put a school in a position where they have to overpromise, right? If we
exactly
support,
keep it real.
You and I just talked about this earlier today, where you're such a big proponent of getting involved early on in a student's life and throughout the school and being able to build those relationships. And you do it with a bunch of different ways, whether it's a visual or, maybe bringing a truck to a school or really kind of just painting that vision within that student's mind and kind of planting that seed. I don't think there's enough Ray Clarks out there doing that, right?
That might be a good thing.
I did see your wife earlier, so I should ask her that too.
Yeah, that might be a good thing.
Yeah. But no, I think we need to start earlier. We need to be more involved, not only with the programs, but with the students themselves. And we as an industry cannot afford to not have the proper amount of instructors in these programs.
And it gets thinner.
And we got to help them fill these classrooms, right?
Yeah.
But we have to get involved. If it's that tech school out there and they're struggling to get enrollment, you better darn well have a good enough relationship with them to understand when they're lacking enrollment so that you can get in there.
Yep, exactly. And you've heard my stories before. Like I've literally gone into a 6th grade classroom and then everybody's looking at me like, 6th grade, they're like, come on, Ray. They're like, they don't even know what they're going to do tomorrow and stuff. I'm like, okay, hey, so look at it in this perspective. In 6th grade, yeah, they may not know what they want to do in another 6 years when they become a senior, but don't stop at 6th grade. This ain't a one and done deal. Like this is go back. And I'll tell you what, I brought a little cutout of an engine cylinder that I cranked around and I kind of broke it down into the 4 strokes of a combustible engine, joked with them about fixing things with their dad or their grandpa. Hey, zip ties, duct tape will fix anything. Right. And I just, it's like that thing and you can tell which ones things start to click, right? Yeah. And it catches their eye. Then you go back 7th grade, 8th grade, right? Hopefully they've got school programs and you keep seeing the same, even if it's 1 or 2, man. And you just did that. And then everybody's like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. Right. It's like anything. It's a marketing, it's a sales tactic in a sense, right?
Networking.
Yeah, networking. Everybody does it.
You're building relationships that could eventually.
How do you sell the badge? You put it in people's faces more often, right? And so, oh, geez, maybe I ought to look into that more often, right? So, and I guess that's my perspective is like, I don't think 6th grade is too early. I think you get it in there and it's just but you got to stay fresh. You got to stay at it.
Well, and you have to meet them where they are too, right? I think so many, myself included, are terrible at this of going into a classroom, and we're so programmed to talk business now, right? So when we go in, we're trying to talk about the business side of it. If you're talking to a 6th, 7th grade,
they don't need to know that.
Freshman or junior or freshman or sophomore, they don't care yet. Like being able to make it, show off the cool parts of our industry.
That is definitely the hard. That's why I said it's like, okay, so let's bring in this basic little engine that goes up and down and they can sit there and they can watch it and learn a little bit and a little bit, get their mind thinking, right? And then you start joking, like I said, about the zip tape and, hey, you guys got any bicycles, right? Have you've had to blown a chain off it before, right? Did you fix it with your dad or did you do it yourself? And like, so that's the kind of stuff. And maybe because I'm a kid at heart, I guess, really, when you look at it, but
that's not a bad thing.
No, but, and that good segue into the job experience here. When you look at these numbers, this one hurts me.
It does.
Like, okay, so the most of the industry right now, hate to say it, people, average age is 40 years and up. So like, well, you got 21 and up, but still, that number, like across the board, 62% is a huge, Christ, what are the others? Like, this is years experience. So we're not getting enough still coming in.
Well, we're getting older, right?
And exactly.
And we knew this was coming a long time ago, where that baby boomer generation was going to have all of these people that were going to be retiring at the same time. And it was going to put us in a really bad spot. Not only just our industry, but I think a lot of other industries.
Manufacturing, I'm sure, is probably
any other skilled trade.
Yep.
I've heard that from accountants, right? They're having trouble finding new accountants. So I think it's not just even the blue collar trades. It's a lot of different areas, but what you see here is very similar to what you see in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You see it kind of in any trade publication that's ever done some type of study like this, is that we are getting older. So we are having more and more of our really, really good experienced technicians that
looking at retirement.
And we don't have enough to fill their jobs, right? So we were already hurting prior to this kind of mass retirement. And then now you're struggling maybe to get more students interested in our industry. And on top of that, I think there are more and more techs that have left the industry and gone and done something completely
gone elsewhere.
Right?
Yep.
And so that was where, when we look at this Voice of Technician survey, that's such an important piece is, okay, like you may feel that pain at your local level, right? You're feeling that, but it's because of this bigger picture.
Yeah.
And any shop that's listening to this, if you could take a step back and just think about this, and if you put it as, I once had an advisor, a consultant that worked with me at one point, and he said, Jay, literally everything in this world comes down to just a math problem. And this is just a math problem. There aren't enough people to fill all of the open spots. That's put us in a really, really bad spot as an industry. And so that's why all of this is so important, is we need to start listening, and not only just listening, but actually putting things into play.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and we'll get to this in Net Promoter Score, that is a little frustrating to me, is that I personally think in many ways, technicians have never been treated better than they are right now.
Oh,
right?
Guaranteed.
And so
guaranteed that.
Yeah, you put that together with the fact that maybe our Net Promoter Score is going down.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that more later, but it's one of those things where you're like, what else can we do? How do we keep improving? And I do really feel for a lot of shop leaders out there, because I think there are so many that are trying their best and just really not being able to kind of meet the expectations and hopefully the realistic expectations of those technicians that are out there.
The one thing on this note that if I could do and say anything, so everybody's looking at, okay, so I got senior technicians, even as an independent shop. And we argue, I don't want to say we argue, but we always complain, I can't take any more new guys on. I can't afford new guys. They need experience. There's no experience out there. So your experienced guys that are looking to leave now, don't let them go. There's your coach. There's your trainer, like in-house. Like, use what you have. Don't, you know what? I mean, if I'm in my mid-50s and I'm still busting my knuckles on the floor and stuff, and it's like, I've literally been in the industry that long, I'm going to tell you that 99% of those people are willing to share their wealth of knowledge and give back. And how much better than to, hey, you know what? I don't have to bend over and bust my back to take that tire off anymore, or do this or do that. And I can show all these easier ways of not getting hurt. Hey, don't do it that way. I've been there, right? So with this number, and when we're constantly fighting to grow our industry, don't get rid of the ones that are good, that are valuable.
And not only that, like, what are you showing that younger tech when you do promote that more experienced tech into a different level? One of the big things,
I've got a career
path that we all talk about,
a career,
right? And they can actually see a career path.
I'm not going to bust my knuckles and disappear into the sunset, right? I mean, that's the big thing too, is everybody's like, oh, what do? I retire and walk off into the sunset with my toolbox, right?
Yeah.
Maybe go find a farm somewhere that I can tinker around and do something on or whatever.
That's a common perception, right? A lot of times that technicians will say, they're just going to work me to death. And then when they don't need me anymore, it's all,
That probably hit home for quite a few of you guys out there. Like, and then I'm looking at the locations, and it was pretty astounding that when you look at this map, like, of course, the East Coast side is like just pounded heavy. California looks heavy right there, but Midwest to that Western, our Midwest area definitely is a little bit thinner, I guess, if you want to talk about from Chicago, Illinois, all the way down Indianapolis area, it starts to really thicken up. I was really taken by your dots in Michigan area. That is huge. You got some up there, but just the location area now here's the other thing too, at the bottom of this page is over 3/4 of these technicians, as we've been talking about earlier with your partnership with ASE, hold ASE certifications.
Wild, right?
So that is good to see. So here's my theory, and I'll let everybody know. I was ASE Master Tech on the automotive side way back when, right? I became a service manager. I knew what it was like to become ASE certified and stuff. And then I started talking to people, and some of them, it was like, it's just a piece of paper that says I know how to take a test. But you also have the knowledge in the background. So it's not, I know that it's, they can't be OEM specific. There's way too much detailed out there, right? For that kind of specific stuff that's training wise goes. But it tells me that you know about our industry. Like if I give you a brake job, if I give you an engine to tune it up, or if I give you an electrical issue, HVAC, I know that you have some thought and theory behind it, and it holds some status.
And there's value in it. And I am biased because I do really believe in ASE. And I think it goes back to, I heard a story that Dave Johnson, the CEO of ASE, told me, and I mentioned this to you, but I thought it was so good to hear the origin story of ASE. And I think a lot of times we just think, oh, well, the OEMs got together and they said we need a certification.
Put a stamp on it.
Yeah. But what really happened was that the government wanted to mandate some type of certification or some type of licensing for technicians, and they wanted to run the system back in the 70s. And just like most people, they kind of looked at the government and said, well, we've seen the way you operate on a lot of other stuff, and we don't want you touching it.
Yeah.
So that's how
Canada is certified as diesel technician.
Yes. Red Seal certification.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so I think the origin story of ASE is very important to understand, because that's why it was in play to start with, was to really have accreditation for our industry. I still believe we need that accreditation. Yeah. Now, through OEMs, we still get all of those types of credentialing, the credentials, but I still think there's a huge need for more vision and more visibility to ASE, and to really help build that brand back.
Yeah,
because it is a great brand, and they do some really, really amazing.
I do too. And as you know, I'm kind of right now in the final steps of let the cat out of the bag, but we're hopefully fingers crossed, and at my application's in, we'll have some ASE accreditation ourselves.
And you should. I mean, this place is fantastic. This is an incredible facility.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of credit to the entire Truck Country team, because this is amazing.
Yeah, like I said, we've done some expansion this year, 30,000 square feet of training center, kind of divided it up. We've got a vehicle side, we've got a powertrain side. As you know, we've got our apprenticeship training. So again, it's just great growth, and it's been honestly, it's been a great ride to kind of be part of that and work through. So like what you looked at, some of the factors, they looked at pay structure, they looked at work schedules, the commuting, when I looked at the numbers and stuff in there, and I made a quick note on here, because we're finding some struggles ourselves, not only like once we hire them, but even coming into our programs and stuff, is they don't want to travel. Yeah. And it's funny because some of the numbers are a little bit different when I see that in here, but from our perspective, like we literally have people that are an hour away. Nah, can you do it here closer? Can you do it in-house? I mean, and then we've got techs that come from northern Wisconsin to Dubuque, Iowa, that are a 4+ hour drive, and they come down here and stay the week, and we put their training on. So I thought that was cool. The other thing that I liked that you guys did is, and I liked your verbiage on this, was nice to have or must have, so it wasn't like, there wasn't wants or anything. It was kind of a must or a nice to have. So that was pretty cool to see those.
Yeah. Yeah. And I give Sarah and our entire marketing team a lot of credit for that. They did a lot of work with this. And I mentioned my co-founder, Mark, before.
Yep.
He's kind of a statistics nerd, right? So
yeah, he likes his numbers.
He does. So this is right in his wheelhouse. If I were to done this on my own, would not be good. So this is really, really good. All credit to them.
I think that's why you and I get along good, because I'm the same way, right? As I'm not a numbers guy. My analogy, and even as a service manager, when I was running service departments, it was funny because it's a little different of analogy. I always projected myself, which truly kind of born and raised in the country, but I'm a farmer, right? So if I maintain my equipment, and I have the right people working for me, I plant the crop, I do everything that I can, right? I know what I have to do to get a good crop, but there are some things out of my control, Mother Nature. But in the end, you should be able to have a nice harvest in the end. And that's been my whole mentality, is like, I don't have to sit and look at numbers all the time. That's not me personally, right? I don't want to live and die inside a budget, inside those numbers. It's like, I'd rather live and die in the shop, watching the people, knowing them, building that relationship, I guess, because if they're upset, that hurts your numbers.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you're sitting watching numbers, you're not paying attention to the ones that are hurting your numbers. And it's almost like you have to be reactive then versus being proactive. So I just portray myself as like, I'll be that farmer, and I'll sit back and I'll plant a good crop. And you know what? There are some things, the economy, you can't help the economy, so I kind of look at it that way. And I think that's what, I think that helps kind of keep that relationship going and building and stuff. So
couldn't agree more.
So we've got what technicians and students look for in employers. So this was kind of cool. Like, again, the way they worded it was not important at all to them, nice to have, or a must have. So this one caught me a little bit off surprise as far as the number one thing for must have a little bit was proper equipment in the shop. Like that one was like, that was number one. Like I can see paid vacation came in next in the retirement fund. Like, so there's some financial things there. And we joke a little bit now because as we are learning that pay isn't everything to everybody.
And it's still, I think the one thing I'll say here is pay is still the most important thing, right? If somebody's not getting paid what they're worth, or at least in the ballpark of what is competitive, that's what's going to lead them to look elsewhere, right? So pay is still kind of the qualifier, and then all of this comes in after that, right?
Yeah.
So proper equipment in the shop. But when you look at this, 80% of the technicians that took this were ASE certified. So they're probably pretty good technicians.
Yep.
Proper equipment in the shop. I think over the years have seen shops that don't have proper equipment, or maybe they have the proper equipment but don't keep it updated the way they should, or maybe it's unsafe. And
nothing worse than having a floor jack and the seals slowly leaking down on it before you can even get a jack stand up underneath.
Right. And that's, I think that stuff is irritating, because if I'm a technician and I'm a good technician, I want to be able to use my talents to be able to fix that stuff as fast as we can.
Yep, for sure.
So I think I do think it's really valid that it is a really, really important thing.
Yep.
But yeah, I was surprised it was overpaid vacation. I was surprised it was overpaid training even. But I think they're all very, very
important. Yeah. Like I said, when I feel like they mask that a little bit on the pay thing when they say, pay isn't always important to us. Pay isn't always important to us. So looking at that.
One last thing.
The
last one was kind of almost a joke, almost, because it was the periodic company paid lunches.
Yeah.
If you spent any time on social media, you'll see the text just blasting that, right?
Yeah.
So we put it out there. I think it's nice to have. It was almost kind of more of a running joke amongst WrenchWay or some of the technicians that were out there.
Well, you see the one that I circled, and that to me was disappointing. I would have liked to seen it up so right about in the middle of this was a well-documented career path. And that's been my driving force for the past couple of years is, certifications versus pay scale. But really, I keep looking back at it, and I'm not military, I'm not government or anything like that, but I look at it as, if you're a paid fireman or a police officer, or you are in the military, it's like, hey, if I'm just the guy on the truck, on the fire truck, and I got to put the fire out. Okay, how do I become the guy, the lieutenant, the captain? How do I become, first assistant chief, second assistant chief? How do I get those rankings? And my mindset's always been there. And I've spent 25 years of volunteer fireman myself. And even though it was volunteer, we were still titled and ranked, right? And in order to take that next step, you had to improve yourself.
Yeah.
And that's, like I said, right in the middle of the road. I would have liked to seen that one up a little bit higher.
I would have too. And, we talked about it in taking that experienced veteran technician and making them a trainer or something like that. I think a lot of times what happens is if say you're that 40-year-old tech that's out there and you don't see a clear pathway to retirement other than working in the shop, and your body's starting to ache, your body's starting to hurt, and it's not as easy to lift everything as it once was.
Yep.
then you start to go in the back of your head and say, okay, how am I going to make it to retirement? My hands are starting to really hurt. My back's starting to hurt. Well, when
lots of Tylenol.
Yeah, ibuprofen. But when you start to introduce alternate career paths, and that I think ultimately gives that, especially that age technician, kind of that vision to say, okay, there are some things that I can do here that maybe aren't the same exact things that I'm doing right now.
Just like we talked about earlier, sunsetting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
now I've got a path.
Absolutely. And I think you're going to see more and more of that with more and more diagnostic techs. So those diagnosticians, maybe they don't have to do all the heavy lifting, but they can do a lot of the brain work and be able to tell somebody what's wrong with it, but maybe not necessarily have to fix it.
Yep.
I just think there's a number of different ways that you can go if you have that core technical aptitude to be able to do all of these different things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you, like I said, you look at the numbers, that's why I said mask it a little bit, because if your categories, paid training, paid vacation, it's almost like they, like I said, mask it a little bit because pay is in their mindset.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's in there for
and that's part of their benefits package in general. And I think if you were to ask somebody honestly, like, would you like to have every single one of these things? Everybody would say,
oh yeah,
right? Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah,
right.
Right.
Give me it all.
So it is in some sense, like, what do you want most rather than what do you want?
Right.
And
Rank
so
it a
it's
little
trying
bit
to be
for me.
able to prioritize.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and then and then it does come back down to pay structure. When you look at that, I think that's another thing. I've worked in the automotive. I was full blown flat rate technician for years in the auto world with Chevy and GMC dealers, and I learned to hate it very much at times because I remember the old days. Your time card was out in the slots, and when your service manager come out and he starts pulling time cards, you were like, warranty just nicked me on something or got us somewhere. And, you knew your deductions were coming because warranty pulled something off your time or something.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I know we've done a really good job of steering more and, some flat rate blended thought process of, hey, I want to pay you for the time you're here at least, right? But I also want to kind of give you some bonus incentives. So we've got some different pay plans, but again, like I said, preferred status down there, no brainer on that one, right? Like,
yeah.
Can we go hourly?
Yeah. And I will say there are still a lot of technicians that I talk to that absolutely love flat rate. They would hate it if they got flat rate taken from them.
Now, is that auto or diesel side or both?
So more on the automotive side, but what I'll say is I have seen more and more of that creep into the diesel side. Spoke at a diesel conference in the spring of 2024, and I was surprised at how many diesel shops had that flat rate scale for their shops. I think, when I was in the diesel world 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, it was all hourly. Yeah.
Yeah, there was nothing other than that.
Right.
That's kind of evolved over time. But I think what this tells you is, in a lot of ways, the technicians want a high floor because they want to make sure that they can pay their bills, that they can take care of their families. And you know what, if I don't have a good service writer that's not writing up the work that I need to be done or not selling it, then I'm not going to have anything to do. And it's not because of me at all.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest factors.
Those uncontrollables.
Right. Yeah. There's so many things that are happening outside of my control. So if you can give them some level of security on that floor level salary, and then also have the incentive of, if I work my tail off, I still have the high ceiling.
Yep.
Like, I think you have something there. And something that I've seen a lot of in the last few years, especially, has been adaptation of payrolls. So maybe not just necessarily saying everybody that comes in here is a flat rate tech, or everybody that comes in here is an hourly tech. It's a lot of the shops have started to ask, like, what pay plan would you like?
Yeah.
And so it gives that technician some level of control. I think it's an administrative nightmare to navigate all
when you
that,
start blending it. Yeah, it is.
But
it is.
I have seen more and more, and even some of these really, really big dealerships start to adapt based on what their people want.
Yeah.
And I think they've gotten some really, really good people as a result.
Well, I look at it, and I always have, especially more so now being in this training lane that I am and the educational pieces. We are truck doctors.
Yeah.
Like, you don't plug into a truck and the laptop tells you, here's what's wrong with it, right? It gets you in a direction, but I think that's a huge misconcept too, right? It's like, oh, you know, you can just plug your laptop in and my truck's fixed. It'll tell you what to do. Sorry, but it doesn't tell you without some heavy mind thought in there. Huge math skills.
I wish we as an industry could do a better job of showing the general public a diagnostic process. Right?
Oh,
so like
there's a good concept.
Yes, just being able to take, you know, this truck and say it's got whatever a normal fault on a Freightliner would be, right? Not that they ever have any fault.
Oh, no, but they have their fair share. Keeps us in business.
But say you have that normal kind of thing that every vehicle ever made anywhere has, and you walk through the actual diagnostic process and you do it in a way that's like this, where we're videoing it, and then you're able to show your customers, hey, it isn't just plugging this scan tool and it's not just doing this one thing.
Exactly.
That's the starting point. Then you're starting to really try to put together.
Then you got to make the repair, and there's a ton of
there's so much that goes into it.
Post repair per se, and post diagnostics. Is it exactly what it kind of led me down that path, right?
Yeah. And it at some level, I think, would show the general public how smart technicians are, right? Because they're extremely intelligent people. And I think they need to see that side as well.
Yeah.
It can't just be our industry saying, hey, these are very smart people. There's so much content you could put on YouTube. There's so much you could put out there to educate the general public that would really help our industry.
You've heard my analogy when I go into high schools about the gamers, right?
Oh, I love that. By the way, I've stolen that story numerous times for numerous presentations.
And I'm telling you, I truly think that, you know, why can't we use those gamers? So for those of you, if you haven't heard of my perspective, is I've gone into schools before, and I don't try to single anybody out by any means, but I always ask them, I'm like, hey, who's the gamers in our room here? You know, and it's one or two, because they all shrink down in their seats, and, you know, the other 8 kids are pointing at them, and I'm like, hey, no, this isn't. But I have a screenshot on a couple of presentations of a Freightliner Detroit in a regen process, right? So when you look at that, there's temperatures, there's sensors, there's voltages, there's pressures. I mean, just numerous things going on. And my analogy is I said that, all right, hey, Jay, if you're a gamer, how many things do you typically have going on in your screen during one game? And they're like, several things. I said, yeah, I mean, most likely there's a lot going on. I said, but your main focus is, right, typically it's my life, right? I want to survive going through whatever it is. I said, okay, but you usually have, you know, your ammo down here, your weapons and everything going on. I said, what do you think? How many things you got going on in this screen right here? And I said, oh, but the other thing you got to be really good at is math, because see all those little numbers up there between pressures, voltages, and temperatures? You got to do math real quick in between there. I said, so you're a gamer, you multitask, you do very well with it. What if we were to teach you to do the same thing and think of it as a game, and we teach you how to diagnose that truck just by that? And now all of a sudden kind of lights start going off, and they're like, oh, I said, and you know what else you do when you diagnose? I said, not all the time, but for the most part, you don't get dirty. You don't get that dirty, right? And then now all of a sudden I've got everybody's attention, and they're like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, look, it doesn't come overnight though. Like, you're not an instant diagnostic tech, like overnight. Like, it's going to take you, we've got guys 3 years into the industry that they're just savvy. I mean, they get it, but they are kind of that gamer hands-on perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kid that came up through, and it's like, that stuff clicks. And so that is one of the things. And I think we now have to think outside the box so much that we can't leave any stone unturned. We just saw stats, right? We're losing to an older crowd. We're not getting the younger guys in here. I don't know what the interest is, how we can spark that interest. But again, gamers, you know.
Well, visibility in general too, right? And I think at some level, we've had the message for a long time that, you know, this isn't a career that's as dirty as it once was.
Right. You will get dirty.
And that's
what.
You know, what's funny though, is I think the more and more we've carried through with that message, the more and more we can't forget that there is a dirty element to it as well, right? And believe it or not, that still appeals to a lot of younger people too. It's just that maybe that message might be different for those two different kind of genres.
I don't
right?
mind getting dirty.
And that's okay. And I think that's the part of saying there are several different ways you can go with this career. And regardless if you like to get dirty or not,
Right.
we've got great opportunities.
For sure. Let's see where we're at here. Like we talked about, I kind of hit that a little bit on the hourly salary. I think you're hearing that pretty more and more though, like we just talked about, that it's hourly, but more of the OEMs are kind of steering to the flat rate still. They're trying to hold.
You're seeing it a little bit more. I think what was really interesting to me, and we put in the green were the percentage gains year over year,
Yep.
and the red were percentage decreases year over year. And actually hourly or salary flip-flopped with hourly with production bonus. And when Mark and I first started going through this data, that was one where it really stuck out to me, because I said, okay, why would somebody not want the production bonus with hourly?
Yeah.
And as we thought more and more about it, our thinking is that maybe the technicians answered it as saying, well, you're going to reduce my hourly to give me more of a bonus instead of
see where
just
they
giving
go
me
that.
the hourly up front.
So they thought it was a play, maybe.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And
Because it's down on the diesel side, down 18%, down 9% on the auto side. But yet the hourly salary, like you said, is 21% from previous,
yeah,
and 10% on the automotive side.
yeah,
And that's going hourly.
it's crazy. And for any of you diesel techs that are watching this and have input on it, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know how you answered that. So next year, when we put this together, we can make sure that we're asking that question in a way that's really clear. I thought it was really clear before. Now I'm like, I just am curious as to the thought process as to how they answered that question.
And while we're here in the middle of this, I mean, we both have kind of talked about, hey, reach out to us. Jay, what's the best way they can reach out and contact WrenchWay?
Yeah, they can go to WrenchWay.com. We've got a lot of resources out there. We have our technician pay tool out there. We have so many different.
You guys do some cool things with your app too.
Yeah, we've got the app. So there, WrenchWay.com is the easiest way to get in touch with us. And just like anything, we love to hear the feedback.
Yeah.
Our product and our business has been built off of feedback. So every time we build something, we want to hear what people, not just technicians, but what leadership or what maybe that service advisor, service writer that's out there thinks of things.
And you guys, I'm going to tell you, WrenchWay is not just a voice of conglomerate corporations or upper management or anything. They literally are here for you guys, the technicians themselves. I mean, Jay, you've done a great job with that, really, and trying to like arm wrestle everybody. Like, look, this isn't a management cap. It's like, we're here for you guys. Like literally, like you want to be heard, just strength in numbers.
Over the years, we've had so many companies reach out to us and want our list of technicians, if you will.
Yeah.
And like, this is all anonymous, so it's nothing anyway, but we take that very, very seriously and do not give away any information, do not sell any information. It's really important that, when you're doing something like this, that the people taking it trust that you're doing right with their information.
For them. Yeah.
And we take that very, very seriously, for sure.
And it shows, like, how can we do better for you?
Yeah.
And this is how.
Thank you.
Yeah. Work schedule,
This one surprised me.
It did. And I have been seeing this more, trying to accommodate, like, hey, like, do you do 410s? We've done some weird shift changes, like 5 on or 7 on and 2 or 3 off and back and forth. Even myself, I know, back when I ran a highway department in the summertime, of course, we were 410s, and that truly is nice. But of course, that's a somewhat of a 9 to 5 job in the summertime. But in the shop world, man, when you've got, because there are guys that don't mind working a second shift.
Right.
Like, you know what? I'd rather work a very late shift. My kids are already in bed. I can sleep in the morning if they can get off to school and the wife can kind of get them going and stuff in the morning while I'm sleeping. I can get up. I can do stuff around my house. I can sit and eat dinner when they come home from school with them. I can maybe catch a basketball or some kind of sports game. And by the time they get ready to bed, I'm off to work now. And now I'm doing my thing because, I mean, as we know that some families have to live on 2 incomes, right?
Yeah.
So, it kind of keeps that well-rounded, and 410 sometimes really helps do that if you can do a second shift. But it was funny to see that, because the old days, right? It was, you're working 5/8, right? Sometimes Saturday, half a day to throw in an extra time and stuff. And to see that kind of still up there, this was good. As many hours as I can, as many hours as I can work.
There's still 27% of respondents said as many hours as I can work. And I think that's really cool. I had some technicians that worked for me over the years that they were in that boat, right?
Yeah. When it comes to dependability and cooperation, it's like, hey, can you do a Saturday half a day?
No problem. Can I do the whole day?
Yep.
Yeah. We had plenty of those. And I always joke when I was on the ag side and we'd hire farm kids that a lot of times people would complain about working Saturdays, but the farm kids that would come in were just happy they didn't have to work Sundays.
True. Yeah. Yeah, really.
But the last thing I'll add about schedule is I think what's been nice is that has adapted a little bit more. And I think over and above this is the ability to go make sure that your schedule accommodates your kid's ball game. Make sure your schedule allows you to be able to go to those doctor appointments or dentist appointments or eye doctor appointments that you need to go to without catching a bunch of crap for going. Right. And I'm sure it was probably the same way when you grew up in a shop as it was with me, where if I left to get a haircut, when I came back, like, hey, part-timer. Yeah, I was gone for a half an hour.
So I'm very old school driven when it comes to that. Right. Yeah. And when I talked about that, as I mean, my dad was a Boilermaker and like out of town at times. Right. Like, and then he got into his own business and it was like 24/7. I mean, yeah, we didn't work nights, but Sunday it was get up, come on, we got a job to do. And it's like, so, I'm in that work mode thing. And again, even myself, I gave us some kid time, right? I'm missing ball games and this and that. But my old school says, like, if I don't work and I miss those, because sometimes it has to be unpaid time, right? Yeah. I may not have that much PTO, but if I don't work to give my family everything that they want to do, they're not going to be able to do it if I don't bring that paycheck home. So it's a double-edged sword, because it's like, I'm a family people person. Like, hey, you need to take off for your wife, your children, go ahead and do it. Right. But then I'm also on the flip side, like, if you don't work enough, you can't do all those fun things. Yeah, you can't get all that stuff done.
Do it. And I think George Aarons from ASE, a really good friend of mine, he puts it best. And I don't want to age you, George, but you're probably in your 60s.
I know George.
Yes,
I've seen him.
Great. He's a legend in our industry.
Yes.
And he always says in his presentations that his generations, and as he calls them, the gray hairs and no hairs, they live to work. And he said this next generation works to live. And what I love about George is he's open enough to really kind of take maybe not just his opinion, but others into play. And the way he always ends it is he says, and they might have it right. And so I think it's just a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it's in a lot of ways something we've got to adapt to, because I was the same way as you growing up. You just work every hour you could. Right. And over time, as I've had my son, I try to prioritize him, because my dad was just starting a shop when I was a kid, and he never made it to my ball game. Right. And so not that like it was a huge deal to me growing up, but for me, looking back at my dad, I'm like, I bet he misses that. He wasn't able to make it to some of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something I try to prioritize myself even now.
Yeah. Yep. And your son playing hockey is
apparently that's a lot
traveling
of time.
and expensive. Yeah, for sure.
So I got to do the work and get off work.
There you go. Yep. Well, like I said earlier, this one really kind of even took me for a twist, because students were agreeing, and I saw that there was students, but the biggest percentage. So this question was based on the commute to work and back, right? So I'm a Northeast guy, Northern New York area. And for me, it was averaging, if I wanted a decent job somewhere like with a brand name company or something like that, especially in my line, is you had to travel an hour to get to one city or the other. Like I was kind of, it'd get just interstate and I drove. So an hour drive to me was nothing, right? So I moved here to the Midwest and I told them where I was going to move to and stuff. And they're like, that's like a half an hour away. And I'm like, and I'm like, they were like, oh no, we won't drive more than 15 minutes. So it's kind of cool because now I'm out here 11 plus years and I'm like, I'm seeing that. I'm feeling that. Like I said, even in some of our training within our own companies, like if we can't do it here in Dubuque, they won't go to Madison, Wisconsin, which is, yeah, a couple more hours, but nah, when are you going to do that in Dubuque again? Right. So it's like, this one was catchy because the largest number was 30 to 59 minutes.
And this would be the maximum that they'd be.
Right. This is a max. Yeah.
So yeah, the max that 48% said was 30 to 59 minutes, basically meaning I'll drive up to an hour if it's a good job, with a good employer. And I was the same way growing up, right? Like I think my first job, I was driving an hour and 10 minutes one way each way. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think it was that big of a deal.
Think of these poor construction guys though, that literally pile in a truck at 3 o'clock in the morning to be on a job site by 6 because they got a 3-hour drive.
That's tough. I have friends that still do that.
Yeah.
It's tough. That's tough to get any routine down in other than work and sleep.
Yep. So we'll flip through a couple. Oh, we're getting close to those promoter numbers. Yeah. Satisfaction with the current employee. So just kind of a recap by the looks of things here where the shop provides that. But again, we're back at one of the higher numbers up here that strongly agree was adequate paid training.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's that pay thing, whether it's paid kind of my hourly rate or it's give me some training,
Yeah, I think anybody that's really good, I think wants that extra level of training, right? They want that. As technology changing as much as it does now, it's hard to stay on top of. And so if you don't get that training, I think there's this perception in your head that you're getting behind. And that perception is probably reality. Right?
It is.
You're getting behind. And that's not a good feeling in that you see all of this evolution and you're not staying on top of it. You feel like you're all of a sudden going to be behind the 8 ball and everything. And that's not a good feeling to have.
When we have trucks that are 80,000 pounds and you pass them on the highway and look up and you don't see somebody in the driver's seat, there's some technology going on.
I have not seen that yet. I've seen the Waymos in the cars. Have not seen a truck driver, a driverless truck.
They're not a lot out there, but I know there's some autonomous Freightliner trucks out there, and it's literally from radar and cameras and GPS systems that are just running, and I get it that they're like, oh yeah, they're just going up on the highway. Okay, they are, but still, it's literally, there's nobody sitting up there in that driver's seat controlling that truck. And that just like that, again, to the point of technology, right? And with that said, training wise, so we can't bring them in with barely any education from the high school systems because we've lost more and more of the hands-on training from a basic engine, small engine to even woodworking and steel working, right? Metal shop. It was still working with your eyes and hands, doing math equations, measuring stuff out. So yeah, it was nice to kind of see that up there, that they strongly agree that paid training means a lot to them.
Yeah. And some of the stuff that I would point out here is that this is technician satisfaction with current employer. And one of the things that I think you're going to see as a consistent message throughout this is that communication still lacks a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think when you look at this, strongly agree, only 15% said that their shop management communicates well.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. If we, communication is one of those things where it's really easy to talk about, but really hard to do.
It is.
And we as leaders need to do a better job at communicating and being able to, not have to rely on a voice of technician survey, but have good enough relationships with our teams to be able to really, truly understand what they think and get past that surface level, like, hey boss, everything's good, to, hey boss, some of this stuff might actually be bothering me, but I don't want to tell you because I don't want you to be mad at me, or I don't want to inconvenience you.
Right.
For leadership, we need to be able to pull that out of them. We need to be able to truly understand their happiness. Sometimes it's really, really hard. I've struggled with that with technicians over the years, to have those conversations and really pull out that information. But once you do, like, it's kind of the safety valve for them, that now they feel like they can trust you and that they can tell you some of those things are weighing heavy on them. And so the communication piece is huge. And even just understanding what their day-to-day responsibilities are, making sure that they know if they're doing a good or bad job. A lot of times
I don't want to wait, and I've had this conversation recently. It's with my team. It's like, we are so close here, but some people don't want to wait for an annual review to hear if I've done good or done bad. Yeah, I know if I've really done bad, I'm going to get pulled in the office, right? But, to that same point, right? Communicating is, okay, so can maybe we have a monthly type conversation of good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Yeah, I think actually so many shop leaders that I talk to are like, well, I talk to my team. I go by their toolbox and I talk to them. And I said, that's good. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, that's that surface level conversation that I'm talking about, to whereas if you're able to pull them into your office or wherever you want to go, I love when I see a shop manager take one of their technicians out to lunch.
Yeah.
Just
Lunch
in a way
mean a lot.
Oh, they do. And not in a way where it's like, this is an added.
Right. This is not a lunch.
This is just, I want to talk with you, like, and not have the distractions of phones and everybody coming in my
more
office.
of a relationship building.
Yes.
Not a professional way.
There's so much value in it. It sounds stupid, but think of that small investment. You're both breaking bread, you're eating, and then just kind of, if you go take them to a bar for lunch and there's TVs on, and just like, it's a different environment, maybe a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
You can kind of get to know them a little bit more. And, I think we've all been in a spot where you're like, I don't have time to take these, every tech out to lunch. Okay. Well, maybe take one a month out, maybe take one every 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
Just
try to make the time.
Yes. Yes. And don't just pick one or two, like go, get everybody out there and really kind of let them know that they matter. So
yeah,
I whatever your strategy to communicate is, do it, but focus on those relationships, focus on really building those relationships, because that's how that good stuff is going to come out.
Yep. Yeah. And it's, some of the leadership workshops that I've gone through and stuff, and communication always seems to be like, can we fix one thing? Yeah.
Communication is big. I think the other thing, a couple other things I'd point out on here. This again is technicians' satisfaction with current employer. The bottom one, the shop helps out local schools.
Oh, yeah.
Only 11% strongly agree, 15% slightly agree, but the large majority is either strongly disagree or neutral, which tells me not a lot of shops are doing a good job in schools. The next one up is the shop does a good job of teaching new techs and compensating mentors.
Same thing, some higher numbers on the
really just
on the low end, or
most techs are saying that we're not doing a good job at that, right? And so I think that's such an opportunity. And as you read through this is something I've said with a lot of the interviews I've given for this study, is that when we're talking about, like, how do we listen to these techs? How do we listen to how we improve their lives? How we make them more happy with us as a shop? These are all categories where you can go through and say, you know what, for our shop, we think we do a decent job communicating, but not great. Here are the different avenues of communication that I think we fall short on, and then work to try and improve those as we go into this new year, right?
Yeah.
And as you go through this, I think maybe the most telling one to me is I would recommend this shop.
I was just looking at the same thing. Yeah. I'm like,
and so you still look there, the majority would say that they would recommend their current shop to a friend. And that's a good thing, right? Because I think that tells us that there are a lot of really good shops out there. And that's a good thing, because we need really good shops to be able to keep these technicians employed and in this industry. But there still are a fair amount that wouldn't. And
I know.
Talent, right?
Right. I mean, how better to market your industry besides from within, right?
Right. Yeah. And if I'm that technician that's out there and I'm interested in going to work at Truck Country, and I have heard some really good things, and now I've got Ray coming and telling me that he works at Truck Country and he loves working at Truck Country, I'm going to believe that a lot more than if I'm a third party coming.
Oh, exactly.
Like, Truck Country is a great place to work.
It's just a sales pitch, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Authenticity is big.
Yeah. So again, if you guys can get this online, and it is available to anybody online, right?
Yeah. Through WrenchWay.com.
And don't think just because you're an independent that I'm not structured that way, because you don't necessarily have to be that big dealership mentality, because you still, I think even in the independent shops, and you're very familiar with it.
Yeah.
Because I think that they're like, oh, well, I'm small. It's me. I run the whole place. Like I'm chief cook and bottle washer and I got some techs, right? There's still a lot of that disconnect that you don't realize.
Oh, so much,
Yeah.
so much. And again, it doesn't matter what size business you are. Those relationships are what make or break your company, right? And if you're not good at building those relationships and kind of really being able to get people to buy into the brand and the passion you have behind that brand, you could be a one shop operation. You still need your customers to buy into that brand. But, if you have technicians working for you, you want them to speak highly of working for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I think I had an author on our podcast and his name was John Spence. And one of the things that he always talks about is that customer satisfaction will never be greater than employee satisfaction. So take care of your employees will take care of your customers.
Exactly. I'm I don't do a lot. And those of my podcasts are far and few between because I'm not looking at to be big famous, but I do follow one guy. His name is Gary V.
Yeah.
And same aspect, man. Like he would much rather put his own employees first before himself all the time. Yeah.
Most smart business people do, right? You want to take care of your people because that ultimately is who's carrying that flag for your business.
Well, they must have done something right here at Truck Country.
I think so.
As you have seen, Steve Arlen, my one trainer here, we joked that he tried to get away from me as a technician. I said, no. What you should go up to the training center. And then I think the year after he became a trainer, I come up here as his boss again, but 45 years.
That's crazy.
So it's like, it's, they've done something right. And we've got quite a group of guys with, 25 and up into the 45-year range that are still working with us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You love us.
Yeah. And again, we're back to the, compensation.
Yeah. This is again, how technicians feel about their current employer. Shop provides fair compensation. 58% said that they feel that they do. That's actually down 8% from last year. Diesel, however, is only down 4%. 62% said the shop provides fair compensation.
Yeah.
So you still have the majority that think that they're compensated fairly, but we don't want to see that number continue to go down.
No, not at all.
We want to see that start to bump up.
Now, I will say that, and for me, I'm looking back when I was service manager, so 7-8 years ago at least. I kind of promoted that, and then it was hard to steal an auto tech to bring him to the diesel game because auto paid very well. And we in the diesel industry back then probably didn't pay as well as we should have. Definitely, as you know, we've seen some growth and increase.
Oh, absolutely. Diesel side has really stepped up.
And now, exactly to that point, we definitely, I think it's easier to take an automotive tech based on pay scales to bring him to the diesel world.
Oh, and I do think that's an area where if that automotive technician isn't loving flat rate and they don't think there's another way to get through automotive with flat rate, you'll see them migrate to the diesel side because it is a little bit, in a lot of cases,
more hourly.
But again, I think it's just because there are options.
Yeah.
And that technical ability sets such a foundation for you as those young people that are listening. I mean, the world is your oyster right
yes
now. If you've got a technical ability, because you can do about
very transferable. Everybody's like, oh man, I don't want to work on that big, greasy big engine or whatever. And I'm like, look, like we've got some very good female technicians that are not large in size, the typical female build and stuff. And they're like, oh, why would I get into that? We've got shop equipment for that. Like, I mean, it's so don't worry about that.
Those experienced techs that are out there, I think you're seeing more and more. That's been a positive in cultures, I believe, in shop cultures, is that technician 30 years ago wasn't going to use that lift that they're supposed to use, right?
Right.
Gonna try
I can muscle this myself.
We have so many tools and different types of equipment that help take that load off now, that you really shouldn't be put in that terrible
exactly
in terms of lifting. So I agree with that.
Whether they use it, right?
Whether they use it, but I do think that you can see as that younger generation is coming in, I don't think they care. They just want to use the safest way.
Yep.
They want to use that.
Yep.
And you might run into some that don't, but I think, when I grew up in the industry, there's almost kind of a source of like,
Oh yeah.
I can lift
thump
that
my chest.
I can lift that transmission up. It's not smart, right?
Right.
Like, and I think for those experienced techs that are going through some of those pains of
How many
maybe
times
that
was this a
decision-
hammer?
Right, exactly. If you could help educate that younger generation now so they don't go through those same pains that you did, set that example in the shop.
Pound it on the wrench with your open hand and then wonder why the palm of your hand, like, I can
my
barely
God,
hold.
it's my knuckles. Still,
Yep. I can barely hold a cup of coffee. It hurts, Yeah, very much. Yeah. So, here they come. I'll let you lead a little bit more on this because it is, just this whole thing was disheartening a little bit to me to see that number in a
Me too. Yeah, and that's the hardest part about putting something out like this is we didn't intend for this to be a negative,
right? Not at all.
Hit you over the hand with a stick, right? We just wanted to be able to be transparent about what numbers were out there, and we came up with this Net Promoter Score. Many of you are familiar with what a Net Promoter Score is, but for those of you that aren't, basically we ask you if you were to recommend this industry to a friend, right? Like the promoters are 9 and 10s, the passives are 7 and 8, so those are kind of the intermediates. The detractors are 1 to 6, and those are the people that wouldn't want somebody to come in. And we went the wrong direction here. Our detractors, the 1 to 6s, were 47%. So almost half of all of the diesel techs that took this would not want somebody that they like to get into this industry, right? The passives were actually down 7% to 32%, and the promoters were only 21% of the diesel technicians that responded to this.
What's going on out there, diesel guys?
Yeah, we want to hear more from you too, right? Like that's where the more people we can get taking this, the more we can really truly understand what it is or where we're missing the mark, right? Because obviously we're missing the mark somewhere here. If it's that low. And I think last year's study, one of the things we saw was that we felt like the diesel techs were generally more happy than the automotive techs. This year it balanced out quite a bit more.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Look, promoters in the automotive world, only 10%, diesel techs 21%.
Yep.
So while we think 21% is low, still quite a bit above
over that.
Side.
And I think you and I talked about it prior conversation here of logistics on this podcast and stuff is how cool would it be to kind of do a follow-up on this and bring a technician in and literally have, like say, all right, hey, look, we're looking at these numbers. What would you do? It'd be cool if we could get both an auto and a diesel guy in a round table.
We need to get some of your truck country guys around here, guys or girls, and sit around the table and
do a nice round table conversation.
Because I do think I would love to hear, firsthand what they think we could do better. And not in a way that's like, oh, gotcha. Like it just more like help us understand, help us truly get to what you truly think of things. And throughout the survey, one of the things you'll see is that there were actually like contradictions, like that
exactly.
In one area they want this, but then in another area they wouldn't rank it as high. And so there is some more digging to do here. And I think the more we have those conversations, and honestly, if what you get out of this is the ability to generate more conversations with your team,
perfect,
job done. Right?
Yep, like perfect with that.
Then we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, because like I said, man, when we look at that, wrapping things up, the industry just isn't going, not where you and I thought it would be. You've been promoting it. I've been promoting it, in the background beside you. And it's like, it's not going in the direction that we thought it was. I mean, you make a statement here, little to no improvement. And if anything, we've kind of worsened from past year.
Yeah. And I hope next year we have double the 5,000 of this year, right? Like we were able to go from 800 to 5,000. hopefully the more and more people see that this is truly like used for good.
Yeah.
We're
this
working to drive those conversations. The more people will want to take this, and we could use a lot more from the diesel side of things taking this survey, because we want to know how to make the situation better. We do, you know, this, we do a lot of educational content around educating shops on how to treat their people better and really what those technicians want. And by getting technicians involved in the conversation, then it's not just WrenchWay screaming.
Exactly.
It's, you know, here are the people that you're trying
this
to
isn't
impress.
Trying to make Ray Clark or Jay Goninen from Truck Country and WrenchWay social media stars by no means, you know.
Not at all.
If that's the case, I don't think either one of us.
No, we're screwed.
Yeah, we would do our own thing, right? We wouldn't have to. It's like, that's the other thing, my God, is that social media, you would think that, like, as big as it is now, I mean, you know, we've got young kids out there making a huge salary off from their phone.
Yeah.
Being social media influencer and all that. So, okay, like, man, you help us then. If you love the industry and you help us market this and get more of those that don't want to do that I want to stand behind a cell phone video screen and stuff, that they want to fix things. Like, most of our really good techs are the shy, quiet ones.
I agree. That's why I wasn't a good tech.
I was very outgoing.
But I agree. Like, at some level, I think we've gotten to a point in the industry to where if you go to Facebook and you look at a Facebook group that is primarily technicians, you see that negative messaging all the way through that group chat.
You're right.
And it's over and over and over again. And so if you're that technician and maybe you actually really enjoy your job, but then you have a bad day and then you go to one of those groups and you see that, you know, oh, everybody.
Don't sway that way. I get it.
It's hard because if that's the narrative and that's everything that's out there, that's what you're going to buy into. And then it's kind of a spiral effect in your own head that, like, oh, I had a bad day at work yesterday. Now I'm having a bad day today. Now I can't get that bolt out. This industry sucks. And I think the key to understand is that it doesn't matter what type of job you have, what, you know, trade you're in, what, if you're white collar, blue collar, you're going to have bad
there's
days.
going to be some bad
There's
days.
going to be tough days
Yes.
of what you do. And so if you can come to that understanding and then truly, like, live it for yourself. And
don't let others, that's kind of, just not to get off on any kind of social media kick, but it's like we're so dependent on what others think of us now, because before, like, I didn't know what Ralph did over here because I couldn't see what Ralph did. So I didn't really care. Now you pick up your phone and you can see what Ralph did the last hour ago, right?
Yeah.
And back to the point of all those negatives, right? I'm like, I have always used this for years in my management. If you truly hate your job or are that disgruntled with where you work and what you do, then it's time to move on. Like, if you have to force yourself to get out of bed, get dressed and drive to work, then it's time for a change.
Yeah.
Like, don't sit back and constantly belittle the company you work for or the other people that you work with and do all that negative. Like, come on, like, is it truly all of them, or could it be you yourself? Like, if you're that unhappy.
Well, I think sometimes that's the hardest part from an industry standpoint, is to kind of get the real out of it, right? Because there wouldn't be that many people out there complaining or taking the survey.
Right.
If there wasn't something they wanted to get off their chest, we should fully listen to whatever it is that they have to say. But then there's other things where you kind of do have to take it with a grain of salt.
Yep.
And when you read some of
Two
those
sides to every
Facebook
story.
messages, you see those people that are out there just constantly trying to bring the others down.
Yeah.
And, like, that's not, you know, if for my business or for any business in our industry, that's not the type of people I want.
Yeah, that's not
right?
that's not what we want. No,
And
not
I
at
think
all.
you and I, we live it every day. We get to see when you have a great tech with a great attitude and that has the talent to be able to fix anything. It's a thing of beauty. Like, they are. It's so fun to watch.
It's a sense of pride.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, again, I've been that promoter when and talking to the kids nowadays, we talked about the truck driving down the road, you look up, there's no driver. I said, but think of this. You're in your same little town and area and you pass a truck that you knew last week you just fixed and it's doing how much that's a sense of, hey, like, hey, I kept that truck on the road.
Yeah.
Like I can get my deliveries now from wherever, right? Or maybe my aunt and uncle can get their deliveries now. Like I kept that truck on the road.
We saw how important trucking was through COVID, right?
Exactly.
We look at the essential workers.
Yep.
Trucking was right on the front lines of all of it. And
didn't shut down.
No. And
matter of fact, it gained.
Right. And people need food, people need gas, people need whatever it is that you're hauling, they need.
So keep that in mind.
Yes.
That I don't care if you were an auto wrench, a diesel wrench, agricultural, or whatever. We didn't stop our jobs. Like everything increased. Like we still had to go to work. I mean, tires had to roll down the highway, man. Tractors had to get in the fields and keep things moving.
At the time it stunk because everybody else was sitting at home. And
exactly.
But I think at the end of the day, it shows you like we're necessary, right?
Yes,
we make this world go around. And if without the diesel world, without the automotive world, we would be in
it'd be
whole lot of trouble.
And that's honestly, that's a perfect conclusion to this podcast because it is. That's and again, how do we keep it going moving forward? That's just more conversation.
More Ray Clarkson.
No, more of us together. It's a team. It's a team for sure. So thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you for
right. And thank you everybody for actually this is my first videoed podcast. So I suspect you'll be able to keep your ear on our webpage for some links and connections to not just my podcast, but to this going into YouTube. So again, thank you all you listeners, More Than Just Trucks.